Welcome to the deep dive. This is the show where we take these baffling achievements from history.
And we really pull apart the sources.
We try to figure out how something seemingly impossible actually happened. And today, we're looking at a number in sports that it just stands alone.
It really does. It's a record that defines perfection in a sport that's all about destruction.
49 wins, 0 losses.
49-0. That's the final tally on the career of Rocco Francis Marchegiano, who, everyone just knows is Rocky Marciano.
He's sort of the ghost in the machine for boxing historians, isn't he?
He is. And the reason is so simple. He is the only heavyweight champion of the world to finish his professional career without a single defeat. Not one.
It's clean perfection in a division that is built on violent, career-ending losses. So our mission today is to go deep into the sources. We're going to look at his life, his unconventional and almost brutally efficient fighting style.
And that discipline, the monastic discipline that it took to keep that perfect record.
All the way from his debut in 1947 until he retired in 1955.
And we're not just talking about squeaking by. We're talking about pure dominance. Marciano, they called him the Brockton blockbuster.
Or the Rock from Brockton.
And he held the world heavyweight title from 52 to 56. But the real story, when you dig in, is in the metrics of his power, the destruction.
You look at his overall career, and his knockout-to-win percentage is, it's a phenomenal 87.8%.
Which is elite, just totally elite.
But here's the statistical kicker, and this is where you realize he was just built for the high stakes. When you only look at his world heavyweight title fights, the sources show he has the highest knockout-to-win percentage ever.
85.71%.
So when the pressure was at its absolute highest, his power was the most reliable thing he had.
He was a genuinely terrifying puncher. The Ring magazine, which is basically the Bible of boxing, they ranked him number 14 on their list of the 100 greatest punchers of all time. This wasn't some defensive wizard or a speed guy. This was a man who generated explosive fight-ending force every time he got in the ring.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Let's start at the foundation, because when you look at how he started, his path it was all over the place. It was not a straight line to the top.
Exactly. Rocco Francis Marchegiano. He was born September 1st, 1923. And his roots are so key to understanding him.
He was raised in Brockton, Massachusetts, the South Side.
A classic working-class immigrant story. His parents, Pierino Marchegiano and Pasqualina Picciuto, were Italian immigrants. His dad was from Ripetitina, his mom from San Bartolomeo in Galdo. And that background just gave him this incredible toughness, this work ethic.
And it's amazing he even made it out of childhood. The records mention he had this really serious, near-fatal bout of pneumonia.
At just 18 months old.
It's almost like a metaphor for his entire career, just coming back from the absolute brink. That resilience seems to have been baked in from day one.
And that struggle, I think, it defined how he approached training as a kid. His fitness routine was it was pure grit.
He couldn't afford a real gym.
Right. So he's working out on homemade weightlifting equipment. And for a heavy bag, he just used a stuffed mail bag, probably filled with sand or rags or whatever he could find.
And hung it from a tree in his backyard. That is such a classic image, isn't it? Just engineering strength because you have to.
It is. And it's also noted that later on, he became a client of Charles Atlas.
The famous bodybuilder, yeah.
Whose whole thing was building strength naturally, which tells you he was always looking for an edge, for a way to maximize what he had, which, as we'll get into, was not your typical heavyweight frame.
And like so many men of his generation, that physical development gets put on hold by World War II.
He enlisted in the U.S. Army, March 1943. He was assigned to the 150th Combat Engineers.
And he wasn't on the front lines, but he was doing absolutely vital work. He was stationed in Swansea, Wales.
And his job was helping ferry supplies across the English Channel, supporting the troops in Normandy after D-Day.
And he was recognized for it. His battalion got a Presidential Unit Citation for their work in Luxembourg and Germany in early '45.
And then he gets an honorable discharge, March 1946, a private first class.
But here's the big twist in the story. Because after the war, boxing still wasn't the main goal.
Not at all.
The sources are really clear on this. His true love was baseball. He played baseball and football at Brockton High, even though he dropped out after 10th grade. He really dreamed of being a professional pitcher.
And that his failure in baseball, that is the great catalyst for his boxing career. In March of 1947, Marciano and some buddies, they go down to North Carolina for a tryout.
With the Fayetteville Cubs. a farm team for the Chicago Cubs.
And he got cut.
After 3 weeks.
Just 3 weeks. His pro baseball career was over before it even started. He couldn't get a spot anywhere else, and he went back to Brockton totally crushed.
And that failure is what forced him to finally dedicate himself to boxing, working with his friend Ali Colombo. But you have to think about that. If he'd been a decent pitcher.
The 49-2 record just never happens.
It's the ultimate what if. The failure of one dream just launches the perfection of another. He did have a brief amateur career, went 8-4.
Won the Amateur Armed Forces Tournament in '46 while he was waiting to get discharged. But even that was a bit rocky. He was controversially beaten in the Golden Gloves All-East Championship in '48.
And this is where we get to one of the weirdest facts of his career. He technically fought as a pro before his amateur career was really done.
Yeah, that's so unusual. March 17th, 1947, right around the time he's trying out for baseball, he fights a guy named Lee Epperson.
And knocks him out in the 3rd round. He was billed as Rocky Marciano.
So he has this one pro fight, then he goes back to the amateurs for a year, and then finally turns pro for good in July of '48. It's such a messy, unconventional start.
And that's when the name change becomes official.
Right. His original name, Marchegiano, the ring announcer in Providence, Rhode Island, just could not say it right.
So his manager, Al Weil, suggests Rocky Mac,
which Marciano hated.
He rejected it immediately. He wanted to keep that Italian sound, and he settled on the name we all know, Marciano.
And from that moment, from Rocco Francis Marchegiano, the failed baseball player, he becomes Rocky Marciano, the guy who's about to carve an unbeaten path.
And once he turned pro for good in July 1948, that path was it was paved with knockouts. He went on an absolute tear.
Winning his first 16 professional fights by knockout.
16 straight. And we should be specific here. The records show that 9 of those ended in the 1st round.
That's not just winning. That is immediate, overwhelming demolition.
But you know, perfection isn't just about power, it's about durability. That streak had to end eventually.
And it did. His first real test of stamina was against a guy named Don Mogard. And despite a pretty average record, Mogard was the first boxer to take him the full 10 rounds.
Marciano won a unanimous decision, but it proved he had the engine to go the distance, and that was going to be so important later on.
The defining moment of that early career, though, it wasn't about a scorecard. It was about the moral weight of his power. We're talking about the fight against Carmine Vingo in December 1949.
This incident is so crucial to understanding who Marciano was as a person.
And you have to understand the hype. Vingo was a huge prospect, 16-1. The sources say this fight was billed as a battle between the two top white hopes in the division. Marciano was 24-0, and he was facing a really dangerous opponent.
The fight was just brutal. Marciano drops Vingo in the 1st and 2nd rounds, but Vingo is tough, he comes back, and he actually starts gaining some momentum in the 5th.
And then the knockout, 6th round. A right uppercut, and Vingo was knocked, completely unconscious.
They rushed him to the hospital on a stretcher. They gave him a 50-50 chance of survival.
A priest even administered last rites. This was the moment Marciano had to confront the truly horrifying consequences of his power.
And you just don't see this kind of empathy in boxing very often. Vingo survived, but he was left paralyzed on his left side, and instead of just moving on, Marciano took it to heart.
He befriended Vingo. He paid for his medical expenses out of his own pocket. Vingo was even well enough to be at Marciano's wedding the next year.
It says everything about the man. There's this quote from him that's just haunting. He said, "Carmine is my friend. He forgave me. If he hadn't, I wouldn't have been able to carry on."
He needed that forgiveness to keep fighting. It was the moral counterweight to the brutality in the ring.
And just a few months later, that perfect record faces its first real intellectual challenge. March 1950. He fights his first ranked opponent, Roland Lastarza,
who was also undefeated, 37-0. The stakes were just astronomical.
And this is where the whole 49 Unbeaten debate really begins. The fight was razor thin, it goes the distance, and the result is a really confusing split decision. 5-4 for Marciano, 4-5 for Lastarza, and one judge has it 5-5 even.
The victory was only sealed because of a supplemental point system they used in New York and Massachusetts back then.
It's an archaic rule. It awarded an extra point for a knockdown, which Marciano got in the 4th round.
If they'd been using the 10-point must system that we have now, the fight would have been a draw. Or, as many ringside reporters believed at the time, maybe even a win for Lastarza.
And this raises that really important question for us. I mean, if the win only came down to this weird local rule that people at the time didn't even agree with, can you really say the 49-0 record is flawless?
Yes, or is this the one tiny crack in the perfection? The record says 49-0, but the
story feels more like 48.9 to .1.
But that's the champion's mentality, right? He got the win. And that victory, no matter how controversial, it paved the way for the most symbolic fight of his early career.
Taking on the legend.
Joe Louis, October 27th, 1951. And we have to stress the context here. Louis was way past his prime.
He was only fighting to pay off these crippling tax debts, but he was still the Brown Bomber. He was still the greatest heavyweight of his generation. And Marciano was a 6.5 to 5 underdog.
The drama of that fight was just incredible. The crowd was torn between honoring the old legend and embracing this new, raw power. And Marciano's pressure just wore him down. The TKO came in the 8th round, and it was dramatic. He sent Louis collapsing out of the ring.
Right down toward the press section. It was a true, if painful, passing of the torch.
Louis said later it was hard to see the new guys come along. It was his last fight ever, and that one victory immediately established Marciano as a legitimate, terrifying contender for the world title.
So this whole journey, from failed baseball player to a feared knockout artist to almost kills a man but needs his forgiveness to go on, it all points to this incredible singular drive he had.
A drive that wasn't about pretty technique. It was about grueling, unparalleled conditioning.
That's the real engine behind the 49-0. It wasn't just the punch, it was the gas tank that let him throw that punch round after round after round.
Yeah.
We really need to do a deep dive into what the sources call his monastic training routine.
Monastic is the perfect word for it. His brother, Peter, is quoted saying, "Rocky lived like a monk. He was always in incredible condition."
He said he was devoted to training, and he could always throw more punches than he faced. He's never been given full credit for his conditioning.
Think about that level of self-denial. During training camps, he had this super strict diet from his trainer, Ali Colombo. He completely stayed away from nightlife, and he went to bed at 9:30 every single night.
He just eliminated every possible distraction.
And his cardio. It wasn't just jogging, it was torture. He ran at least 5 miles every day, usually up punishing hills. But the detail that always stands out, the one that you have to explain, is running back downhill backwards.
That sounds just counterintuitive and dangerous.
It does. But there was a reason. Running backwards downhill builds extraordinary eccentric strength and muscle control. It hits your quads, your glutes, your core way more intensely than running forward. It forces you to stabilize.
So he wasn't just building endurance, he was actively engineering the power source for his punches. His gym work was the same. Just basics, but pushed to the absolute extreme. Countless hours of sparring, heavy bag, thousands of push-ups and sit-ups.
And we can't forget the medicine ball thumps to the gut.
Right, just lying there while your trainer repeatedly slams a heavy ball into your stomach.
It wasn't just for core strength. It was conditioning his body to absorb the kind of punishment he knew he'd have to take to get inside on taller opponents.
But the most specific, most bizarre training detail, the one that really shows his commitment, is the underwater shadow boxing.
Yes. He would go to the local YMCA during his training camps, and he would literally get in the pool and shadow box underwater for hours.
And the logic behind that is just pure physics, right?
It's pure physics. Water provides massive uniform resistance. He was slowing all his movements down, forcing his muscles to push against that resistance through the entire range of motion.
So it builds power and stamina in the slow twitch fibers, and then when you get out of the water, the air feels like nothing.
Exactly. His punches would feel light, fast, explosive. He was basically pre-fatiguing his muscles in a way that just maximized their performance in the ring.
That kind of commitment is why he never lost. That conditioning is what fueled the destructive mechanics of his style, which was, really unusual for a heavyweight.
He was short for the division, 5'10", with a really limited 67-inch reach. He couldn't fight from a distance.
So he had to invent a style based entirely on compensated power and just relentless pressure. Let's break down the signature punches. We always hear about the Susie Q right hook.
It wasn't a straight right. It was a winding, looping, overhand right. He'd throw it when opponents were expecting a jab or for him to cover up.
And the knockout potential of the Susie Q came from how he loaded up on it.
He'd bend his knees really deep, use exaggerated head movement to kind of hide the windup, and then he'd put his entire body weight into the arc of that punch.
Yeah.
It was a sledgehammer.
And he also had this technique that analysts called the gazelle punch.
For his hook, yeah. And this was a very specific move. Instead of just turning his shoulder, he would spring up from that deep crouch.
From all those backwards downhill running drills?
Exactly. He'd spring up to add vertical power and to cover distance really fast. It would catch guys totally off guard.
His footwork was just. It was the definition of an unconventional brawler. He used this shuffle step, bringing his back foot up to meet his front foot really quickly to close the distance.
It wasn't elegant at all, but it was so aggressive. And it let him keep that forward momentum while generating maximum torque for his punches.
And when he was chasing guys, sometimes he'd just completely shift into a southpaw stance.
Which most boxers would never do. But Marciano didn't care about the textbook. If switching stances let him cut off the ring or land a shot, he just did it.
And defensively, his tactics were just as strange. He used what they called a backwards-leaning advance.
So instead of weaving under punches, he would shuffle forward while leaning his torso backward.
Wait, shuffling forward while leaning back? That just sounds so awkward.
It does. But it was genius for his style. It kept his head out of the range of jabs and straight rights while he was still moving forward. And if an opponent tried to punch, he could just lean back even further to lessen the impact while he's closing the gap.
And once he was inside, that short frame became an asset. He'd drive his head into the opponent's hips or shoulders to unbalance them.
And once they were off balance, he'd unleash that barrage of short, tight punches. He just never gave guys room to breathe.
With his short reach and, not a lot of hand speed, he barely used his jab. His whole trademark was just relentless forward pressure.
He broke men through attrition, through pure, unbreakable will.
That unbreakable mentality might be his greatest trait. And we should say it again, he was only knocked down twice in his entire professional career. For a guy who walked through punches to get inside, that's just astonishing.
He had a granite chin. And to put a number on that raw power one more time, let's go back to that scientific analysis. A December 1963 issue of Boxing Illustrated published a test on his punch power.
And the conclusion was just extraordinary. They said, Marciano's knockout blow packs more explosive energy than an armor-piercing bullet.
And represents as much energy as would be required to spot lift 1,000 pounds 1 foot off the ground.
1,000 pounds, 1 foot. That's not a person, that's a machine. And when you combine that explosive force with the obsessive monastic conditioning, well, the 49-0 record starts to look less like an anomaly and more like an inevitability.
And that engineered dominance, it really peaked during his championship reign, which started with one of the most dramatic title wins in boxing history.
September 23rd, 1952, Philadelphia. Marciano is facing the heavyweight champion, Jersey Joe Walcott, a veteran known for being slick and having great defense.
Walcott gave him a nightmare start. Just moments into the fight, Marciano's dropped for the first time in his professional career.
He looked clumsy, and Walcott, the master stylist, just started building this huge lead on the scorecards.
The drama just kept building. Marciano was struggling to catch him. By the time they come out for the 13th round, Walcott is way ahead on all the cards. 8-4, 7-5, 7-4. Marciano needed a knockout. He was running out of time.
The miracle. Walcott does his trademark feint. He drops his hands to set up a combo.
And Marciano saw the opening. He unleashed the Susie Q, that winding, torque-driven right hook. It landed flush on Walcott's jaw.
It was instant. Walcott just slumped, motionless. He kind of folded to his knees with his arm draped over the ropes, counted out, completely unconscious.
The sources described just total chaos. The shock that Marciano, who was minutes away from losing his perfect record, had pulled out the most destructive punch of his career.
And that knockout was later voted the greatest knockout ever in an ESPN poll in 2006. It wasn't just a KO, it was the ultimate expression of his refusal to lose. And he was the new heavyweight champion.
And what's so fascinating is that his entire reign was a testament to that stopping power. The sources confirmed this unbelievable statistic.
Marciano is the only fighter.
The only one.
To have stopped every single opponent he faced for the world heavyweight title.
Every single one. All 6 defenses. TKO or KO. No decisions.
The story starts right away with the rematch against Walcott in May '53. Walcott was 39, but he was convinced he could beat him.
Marciano took no chances. He knocked him out in the first round. Just surgical.
Then his third defense was the sequel to the big controversy, Roland Lastarza II, September 1953.
Lastarza was tricky again. He built a small lead in the middle rounds.
But this time, Marciano's conditioning just ground him down. By the later rounds, Lastarza was battered. Marciano finished him by TKO in the 11th. And that win didn't just defend the title, it kind of emphatically erased the question mark from their first fight.
Then came the 2 legendary fights against Ezzard, a light heavyweight legend, former heavyweight champ. The first fight, June 1954, was the hardest fight of Marciano's career.
It really was. Marciano won a unanimous decision, but Charles, the ultimate stylist, became the only man to ever last a full 15 rounds with him.
It proved Marciano could win on points. But a lot of people felt Charles exposed some of his technical flaws. The referee, Ruby Goldstein, scored at 8-5-2, which shows you how hard The Rock had to work for that win.
So the rematch, just 4 months later in September, produced one of the most dramatic moments of his entire career. Marciano was controlling the fight, but at the end of the 6th round, Charles cut him badly.
A really deep cut on his nose. And the concern was immediate. Marciano felt the blood pouring, and he knew the fight doctor could stop the fight at any moment.
And if that happens, he loses his title on a technicality.
So instead of boxing cautiously, he makes this decision based on pure, violent desperation. He had to end it, right then.
He ramped up the pressure to just an insane degree, forced Charles into a corner,
And just overwhelmed him, knocked him out in the 8th round. He literally finished the fight before the doctor could get a good look at the cut.
That moment just crystallizes his determination. Faced with a threat to the 49-0, he just doubled down on destruction.
His 5th defense was against the British champion Don Cockle in May '55. That one was a bit more straightforward. Marciano dominated and knocked him down several times before the TKO in the 9th.
And then his final title defense, closing out the perfect reign in style, against the light heavyweight champion and #1 contender Archie Moore in September 1955.
And this fight tested that chin one last time. Marciano gets dropped in the 2nd round for a 4 count. It was only the 2nd time he'd ever been down, and it looked bad.
But true to form, he didn't panic. He recovered immediately, showed that incredible cushioning, and just completely turned the tables. By the 9th round, Moore was exhausted.
And Marciano ended his career with a decisive knockout.
So with Walcott, Lestarza, Charles, and Moore all defeated, there was really nothing left for him to prove.
He announced his retirement on April 27, 1956. He was 32 years old. He walked away with that impossible 49-0 record, 43 of those by knockout.
We should mention he did briefly think about a comeback in 1959.
When Ingemar Johansson beat Floyd Patterson, yeah. But after just a month of training, Marciano realized what it would take to get back to that perfect condition.
Yeah.
And he decided against it.
He sealed the record, preserved it for all time.
So what do you do when you seal a perfect record like that? You immediately leverage it. He dove right into the world of media and entertainment.
He was a massive celebrity. He was on all the big shows. The Ed Sullivan Show, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, The Merv Griffin Show.
He even hosted his own weekly boxing show in 1961 called Main Event.
He tried acting a bit, though not as successfully. He had small parts in movies like The Delicate Delinquent and College Confidential.
But he stayed close to combat sports. He was a troubleshooting referee in pro wrestling for a while, and he was a boxing commentator for years. He even got into business. He was a partner in a franchise called Papa Luigi Spaghetti Dens.
But the ultimate piece of his cultural legacy came just before he died. July 1969, he filmed The Super Fight, Marciano versus Ali.
Right, the 2 greatest heavyweights sparring.
Yeah.
And they used that footage to match a computer simulation of a hypothetical fight between them in their primes.
The film came out in January 1970, and famously, they released different versions. One where Marciano wins, one where Ali wins.
So the debate could just rage on forever, fueled by this computer-generated fantasy.
On a personal level, though, we have to connect back to the man, the guy who paid Carmine Vingo's medical bills. His life outside the ring was really anchored by his Catholic faith and his family.
He married Barbara Cousins in 1950. They had 2 children, Marianne and an adopted son, Rocco Kevin.
He'd often go to Mass during training, even right before a fight. He once said his biggest thrill would be to get an audience with the Pope.
And that contrast is so key to his appeal. The most brutal knockout artist of his time was also this profoundly religious, compassionate family man.
Which brings us back to that undefeated debate. The criticisms that still pop up trying to chip away at the 49-0. Critics will say he faced low-quality opposition compared to later eras.
And they always bring up that first Lestarza fight.
Of course.
The fact that the win relied on that supplemental point system. It will always cast a tiny shadow in the minds of the purists. It's the closest that perfection ever came to cracking.
But the sources really push back hard against the idea of low-quality opposition. Decades later, Marciano is consistently ranked among the all-time greats. The IBRO, the International Boxing Research Organization, they named him the 5th greatest heavyweight of all time in 2005.
The Ring called him the 6th greatest heavyweight champion ever in 1998. ESPN ranked him number 14 on their list of the 50 greatest boxers of all time.
So these rankings suggest that even if his style was a little crude, His effectiveness and the quality of his title defenses, stopping legends like Walcott, Charles, and more, it just overrides any of those earlier concerns.
And his cultural status, especially in the Italian-American community, is just immense. He's really seen as the first true Italian sports celebrity to achieve that level of global dominance in America.
He even got recognition from Italy. They awarded him the Star of Solidarity,
Which the sources note was an honor usually only given to people within the Italian government. Marciano was the first person outside that circle to get it. It just cemented his hero status.
And of course, his most famous cultural legacy is being the direct inspiration for Rocky Balboa.
The fighting style, the name, the working class background, it all comes from the Rock from Brockton.
Today, he's fully immortalized. Inaugural member of the International Boxing Hall of Fame in '90, the World Boxing Hall of Fame in '80.
And his hometown, Brockton, Massachusetts, is inseparable from him. They have two statues of him, one at Brockton High, where the teams are nicknamed the Boxers in his honor.
The stadium is named after him, too. There's even a statue in Ripa Titina, Italy, where his father was from.
And his legacy is still actively growing, which proves how relevant he is. In 2023, Springfield, Massachusetts declared September 1st Rocky Marciano Day. And just recently, his childhood home in Brockton was added to the National Register of Historic Places.
That's incredible. It speaks to a legacy that just stays relevant, all because of that unbelievable 49 Nero. But the final chapter of his life is one of just tragic, profound irony, especially for a man whose whole career was defined by rigorous preparation.
The date was August 31st, 1969, the day before his 46th birthday. Marciano was a passenger in a small private Cessna 172.
Flying from Chicago Midway to Des Moines, Iowa. He was going to give a speech for a friend's son, and he was hoping to get back early in the morning for his own surprise birthday party.
Circumstances were just awful. It was night, the weather was bad, and the irony is just crushing. A man who survived the most dangerous sport on Earth died because of a complete lack of preparation in something else.
The pilot, Glenn Bells, was dangerously inexperienced for those conditions.
The sources state he only had 231 total hours of flying time, only 35 of those at night. And crucially, he didn't have an instrument rating, which you absolutely need to fly in bad weather at night.
The result was devastating. The plane hit a tree just 2 miles short of the runway outside Newton, Iowa. All 3 people on board were killed instantly on impact: Marciano, the pilot Bells, and another passenger, Frankie Farrell.
And the official NTSB report confirmed the sad irony. The cause was pilot error. He attempted an operation that was way beyond his experience level. He kept flying with visual rules in terrible weather, and he experienced spatial disorientation in the dark.
A life that was defined by intense, almost spiritual discipline ended because of a preventable lack of preparation.
There's one final anecdote that just speaks volumes about his reputation for resilience, even after he was gone.
When rescuers found his body, still strapped in his seat, the sources say that boxing people, when they heard the news, they referenced this famous, morbid line that was said after the death of the great champion Stanley Ketchel.
Start counting 10 over him, he'll get out.
That dark humor. The suggestion that not even death could keep Rocky Marciano down for the count, it just underscores this almost superhuman reputation he had for relentless recovery.
So as we step back from this deep dive, what does the story really tell us about that perfect 49-zoo record? It wasn't luck.
Not at all. It was a result of a rigorous monastic training regime running backwards downhill, shadowboxing underwater, all to build this engine of relentless pressure.
His style was brutal. He relied on these unconventional power moves like the Susie Q and the gazelle punch to make up for his short reach. He didn't just win fights, he finished every single one of his title opponents.
And if you connect this to the bigger picture, it's this fascinating contradiction. Here's a man whose career was built on physical brutality, a fighting machine who could send a man like Carmine Vingo to the brink of death.
Yet outside the ring, he was known as one of the nicest guys in boxing, a man of deep faith who showed respect and compassion for the men he beat.
And that tension, the ultimate fighting machine, driven by genuine compassion, that's the true legacy of the Rock from Brockton. He achieved something no one else ever has in the heavyweight division.
And it makes you wonder, given that reputation for relentless pressure and determination, what would he have achieved if he'd gone through with that 1959 comeback attempt? Or if he had survived the crash and lived to be the champion's elder statesman in the Muhammad Ali era?
He never got that later stage. His legacy is frozen at that flawless 49-0, and it leaves this lasting question mark on a perfect story. For a man who believed in preparation above all else, Could he have adapted to the changes in boxing and the massive personalities that came after him? Or was his perfection necessarily confined to his own era?
That's a powerful thought to consider.
A powerful and enduring legacy for the man who never lost. That's our deep dive for today. We'll see you next time.